Goodbye. Hello, Heisman.
20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. All the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone.
Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. Oh, no, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
Oh, my friends, week 11 of the college football season. It brings a lot of good things to us. We get Georgia and Ole Miss. We get Alabama and LSU. We get Colorado and Texas Tech, Trey. We're going to talk about that. But most importantly, your byline hits it perfectly for our podcast audience. No more political ads, Trey. Welcome to the political postseason. We made it, my friend.
We made it. We can have all the Dr. Pepper and insurance and whatever other insert big corporation here ads that we can have now. There's a lot of vacated ad space, man. I don't know about you, but I don't know if I was YouTube TV was hyper targeting me or if that was an everybody thing, but I don't know if there's enough companies to fill the space.
No, I agree. I think TV execs may be on their hands and knees asking for all. It may be Spirit Halloween time. I know we just passed Halloween, but Spirit may be able to pick up some local TV spots.
A lot of Smokey the Bear, like those government ones that they just buy at like half rate because they can't sell them. Yeah, and they get a lot of those.
Exactly. A lot of like care, love, friendship, pass it on ads. I think we're
Touch before it went out, coach. That one. We're going to get that a lot.
I think we're due for all of that. So if you survived the political debates and election, then congratulations. We're back to normal programming here. We also had critically, I would like to think that the TV execs knew what they were doing when they went, you know what, let's wait till week 11. And we'll do the college football rankings then. You put up a podcast, a live rapid reaction of the 12-team playoff, the first bracket being set by the committee here in my neck of the woods, up here in North Texas. So if you want to listen to Trey's full breakdown of that, it's only about 15 minutes. It's real easy to listen to on your way into work, on your way home from work, wherever you might be. At 3 Tech Pod is where you can get that. If you're brand new, you can also find it over on our YouTube channel. We'd love to have you join the Jimmies and the Joes. We've grown tremendously here in year 3 of the podcast and really just love having all the new people jump on board. So subscribe to the podcast, to the YouTube, follow us on our social media channels. We've got a lot of postseason content coming up and obviously a lot still to do before we even get to the 12-team playoff. Your big takeaway, Trey, from the 12-team playoff, what did you think about it just kind of generally?
Yeah, 30,000-foot view. I thought they did a pretty fantastic job. I think it was the least controversial initial rankings that I've ever seen. I know people are screaming for justice for Indiana and BYU, and there's been a little bit of outrage about how high Penn State is. I get that, but all things considered, I thought they did a pretty good job 1 through 25. You can nitpick in a few places, but compared to what we've seen initially in the past, I thought it was a pretty good job. Didn't get to hear from you guys last night, though. Would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think initially on election night, to start off with disrespecting Army and putting them at 25, I thought that was a major misstep given what our country was going through last night. I think Mizzou is as many of the country weighed in, has no business in the top 25. They are. I think they'll find a way to exit. They're not even favored to beat Oklahoma this weekend. It just feels like they might be a little bit of a fraud there. You mentioned BYU and Indiana. Yeah, probably a little too low. Penn State feels a little too high. It felt like initially the committee said, you know what, we're going to reward a quality loss for a blue blood program over undefeated records for 2 newcomers. And that certainly rubs us the wrong way. 2 things that I took away from the initial college football playoff ranking. I think SMU is going to get in. They're the first team out at the 13th seed. I don't see a way SMU gets left out of this dance, even if they lose in the ACC title game, which they do have to get there first, but it's a very forgiving schedule to get there. If SMU takes care of business and say they lose in the ACC championship game to Miami, they will have a body of work that deserves a top 12 seed in this college football season. Secondly, I think the Big 12 champ is in real danger of having to play in that first round. Boise State is in the initial ranking, and boy, they are lurking. Their body of work will be impressive if they run all the way. They beat UNLV likely twice and win a Mountain West Conference championship. The way that the Big 12 is now set up, you have to hope that BYU runs the table. Otherwise, a one-loss conference champ out of the Big 12, the way things are kind of set up, I'm really nervous that the Big 12 is suddenly going to be penalized for cannibalizing itself, not having a traditional blue blood with an undefeated record or a one-loss record. I think that could really hurt that conference. And suddenly you've got BYU, I think, going on, on the road, or I guess it would be hosting a playoff game. I also texted you guys this earlier. I don't think the committee would send a playoff game to Boise, Idaho. Nothing against the blue turf, but this is a moment in college football history where so many eyes are going to be glued to it. I don't know that the committee is going to go, yeah, if we have a say in this, I don't think Boise, Idaho is the first place that they're going to want the nation tuned into. And this is not a slant against Boise State. I think it's going to be something that the committee does. And we go, man, that would have been a lot of fun to have a playoff game on the Smurf turf. But just watch that. I think the chess pieces could get moved around the board there. I think the Big 12 champion is in real danger of having to play in that first round.
I don't think the ACC champ is out of the woods yet either, especially if Miami stumbles. It feels like the whole college football ecosystem is just begging for a Miami loss right now. People were really confused why they were the 3 seed, forgetting that they have buys probably, but it feels like they're just begging for Miami to lose. And will Miami oblige? I don't know. They've done a really good job avoiding that so far, obviously. But if they do lose and it's a one-loss SMU versus a one-loss Miami in the championship game, or some kind of weird convoluted 3-way tie that gets Clemson in there, you could see the ACC champion falling out of that too. I don't think that either of those conferences are necessarily 100% safe. When you have a team like Ashton Genty led Boise State, that's the other thing, is there's a big storyline that the committee might want to preserve.
100% agree with that. Miami, we'll talk about them in a little bit. Their defense is giving up points like it's going out of style right now. They have been winning their games, yes, and learning how to win is an acquired skill. But the way that they're doing it, it feels like there are some cracks there that you feel like can be exploited. So we'll talk Miami here in a little bit. Let us know, weigh in at 3Tech Pod. Leave us a comment in our podcast feed on YouTube or Twitter, Instagram. We'd love to hear from you on the 12-team playoff ranking. Trey, let's go to our 3Tech Big 3. This is presented, as always, by Homefield Apparel. Bomber jackets are out. They've got some tremendous outerwear. It doesn't just have to be T-shirts, folks. You can go get hats. You can go get jackets. I believe they've got some hoodies in stock as well. So as the weather's officially changed here in the South, maybe you're down here with us in the great state of Texas, maybe you are elsewhere, Homefield Apparel has you covered for college gear, and 3Tech Pod gets you 15% off your entire first order. Game of the week in our estimation, Trey, the number 2 Georgia Bulldogs on the road, 2.5-point favorites, down in Hotty Toddy Land. Number 16 Ole Miss in the Grove, 2:30 p.m. on ABC. And Trey, this game feels like a landmark game for the conference, not just for 2024, but the way that these two teams have approached the season to this point, the results that we've seen, Ole Miss dropping a couple of uncharacteristic games, Georgia looking terrible in the first half against Alabama, feeling like maybe they let Texas off the hook a little bit in the second half, and then really not doing anything emphatic to beat the Florida Gators last week. This feels like a referendum on the state of the Southeastern Conference. Ole Miss, potentially a program on the rise. Georgia, I mentioned last week, it felt like they had this death grip on the sport. And now we're wondering, is Kirby Smart and his Bulldog team susceptible to an upset? They're 2.5-point favorites on the road here at Ole Miss, but I don't know. I don't like the way that the Georgia Bulldogs are trending coming into this game.
I'm really glad you framed it this way, because You said referendum. I'll use the word gut check. That's what comes to mind for me for both of these teams, because you're absolutely right. We're asking, can Ole Miss win the big one? Can Lane Kiffin get over the hump and win a game he's not supposed to from a national perception standpoint? And does Uga still get the benefit of the doubt, right? Does Georgia and Kirby Smart still get the benefit of the doubt? I think I trust Jackson Dart way more than I do Carson Beck right now. He's thrown 11 interceptions now this year. That's a big problem. I think the analytics love Ole Miss in this game as well. All the ones that I like to look at, SP Plus, our friends over at College Football Insiders, even the ESPN FPI is giving Ole Miss a favorability in this one. It really pains me to say it, Mitch. It feels like I'm going against my principles and my, just teams that I love to pick against. I think I'm going to pick Ole Miss in this one. I think I'm going to take the 2.5 points at home just on where it feels like both of these teams are right now. Earlier in the year, I was telling people, don't give up on Georgia yet when they were going into Austin. If you can take Georgia and the points, definitely do that. But they just haven't really shown to be the Georgia that we know that they have been in the past. And that's really concerning to me going up against an Ole Miss team that feels like they're peaking at the right time.
For Georgia, I looked into their numbers because anecdotally, I felt like this is not the number 2 team in the country. It feels like we're still, at least the committee is still talking about Georgia like they're a national championship winner from years past, like they're undefeated, like they've shown no cracks. They've got Stetson Bennett just pulling things out of his rear left and right. That's not the Georgia Bulldogs team that we're faced with. They cannot run the ball this season. Their line play on both sides has been tremendously average. They haven't been able to necessarily keep the pocket clean for Carson Beck. Carson Beck is not able to read a disguise coverage to save his life. And, oh, by the way, that vaunted defensive front, the front 7 for the Bulldogs that has produced NFL draft pick after NFL draft pick in the top 3 rounds even, they're not getting home to the quarterback this season. They're right in the middle of the road as far as sacks, tackles for loss, pressure rate. Georgia has just not been the titanic juggernaut that we're used to. And so on the other side, though, you've got Ole Miss. Ole Miss is not known for winning these big games, right? Lane Kiffin is 3-15 versus top 10 teams in his career. He is known to be a choke artist in the biggest of circumstances. Part of that has been that his teams have not always been able to withstand the physicality test, right? And we saw this a couple of seasons ago when Ole Miss got blitzed by Georgia. Ole Miss came in with all the momentum. It felt like, okay, this is the time that they can get the dogs. And then they got run off the field because they just couldn't hold up in the line of scrimmage. This year, it feels a little bit different. Not only because Georgia doesn't have an elite defensive line, but also because Ole Miss's defensive line is the best in the country at stopping the run. They are the ones causing havoc plays. And so you give me that. You give me Ole Miss at home. And like you said, Jackson Dart, I don't love Jackson Dart every weekend. I think he's sometimes very hot and cold. But I like him a whole lot more than I do Carson Beck. And so Ole Miss at home, I have to take the points here, Trey. I feel like I'd just be saying, espousing the brand, committing the brand bias that we're all kind of mad at the committee and in these 4-letter networks for propagating. My personal model, I can't pick Georgia here. Now, that being said, against the spread, I'm like exactly 50-50 this year. So Georgia may win comfortably. This may never be a contest simply because I picked Ole Miss. But everything for me is pointing here at the Rebs plus the points.
It wouldn't shock me if Georgia ran away with this one because we know the history. We know that this is a big monkey that Lane Kiffin's trying to get off his back, like we both said. I love to look at what unit I trust the most. And I think I trust the Ole Miss offense the most out of the 4 offenses and defenses. I think I trust the Ole Miss offense the most, especially at home. If this game was in Athens, I might be a little bit leaning the Georgia defense, but at home, I'll give the edge to the Ole Miss offense. I know Georgia dominated Texas on the road. And you mentioned their pressure rate. They got 7 sacks against Texas. So this is a defensive line that can wreak havoc on an offensive line that we thought was really good. But I still have that vision of what Bama did to this defense, Mitch. It's too hot and cold for me. It's either all or nothing on the Georgia defensive side of the ball. And I bet Lane Kiffin is salivating at that. I bet Lane Kiffin has been watching that tape of what Alabama was able to do to this Georgia defense, and he's licking his chops, honestly, as a really good offensive coach. So to me, it's going to come down to which offensive line can keep the other defensive line at bay more. If it comes down to that, though, Georgia might have the advantage. Ole Miss allows sacks on 6.18% of dropbacks. That's 69th in the country. Georgia only allows sacks at 3.28%, 17th in the country. The problem is they protect Carson Beck, but then he throws it to the other team. So they've got to combine protecting him with him making better decisions if they want to get out of Oxford with a win.
Yeah, Beck's fault, and you mentioned the 11 interceptions thrown. Those are all in the last 5 games.
They're all in SEC play, I think.
Yeah. He's not held up well against that uptick in competition. He's not been able to read a disguised defense. If you are dropping a linebacker or moving a safety in coverage, you show cover 2 man and it's cover 3. Carson Beck's throwing it to one of your defensive backs. It's just been one mistake after the next. Now, Georgia found a way to get up off the mat against Florida last week. That was after DJ Lagway went down and Florida's offense lost any sort of spark and identity that they had. The other thing is DJ Lagway in that Florida wide receiver room, they were finding some openings against the Georgia secondary. Malachi Starks got caught with some bad eyes a couple of times. He gave up that big touchdown that Lagway threw right over his head, just basically got greedy and took one step too many towards the box. So if Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin can throw a little razzle-dazzle into it, that's kind of his MO. I think Ole Miss absolutely has a legitimate case to win this game. Again, Georgia could run away with it. I do struggle to see how Georgia would run away with it. I feel like the margins are a lot tighter this year between Georgia and Ole Miss than maybe in years past. The Rebs are not just all speed and flash like they've been in years past. They really do have some physicality to that game. They obviously don't have Quinshon Judkins to carry that rock in the running game, but still talented Ole Miss team. And as much as we were selling them short and removing them from playoff competition after 2 really bad losses, I mean, letting LSU off the ropes, it was in Death Valley at night. I give you that. The loss to Kentucky at home was just inexplicable. But Ole Miss looked like they found something against Arkansas last week. And I think bettors would be wise to take that into consideration.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. That, like I said earlier, this feels like a team that's peaking at the right time. And Georgia feels like a team that can turn it on, but you're going to be asking, will they, every single week? So I last week did a lot of hits to my confidence in Georgia, the way they played against Florida. I think if DJ Lagway stays healthy, they lose that game. And I don't think that's saying anything really controversial.
Let's stay in the SEC for our second game. Number 11, Alabama, 3-point favorites on the road at number 15, LSU, 6:30 p.m. on ABC. Trey, once again, I'm caught wondering if the home dog is not the obvious bet here. We know that Brian Kelly is just different at home in Death Valley at night. For all the road struggles that he has, for all the close games that he's found a way to lose, LSU doesn't lose at home at night. On the other side, for this Alabama team, I know they're coming off a bye, but the last thing that I'm supposed to pick this game off of on the field performance was an LSU team that just forgot how to cover the read option in College Station, but had done a nice job to that point. Until Garrett Nussmeier started throwing interceptions late when the crowd really got into it, it felt like LSU was going to find a way to salt that game away comfortably. On the other hand, Alabama struggled early against Missouri, a team that we have no confidence in. And by the way, a team that didn't score any points with a backup quarterback who also was throwing multiple interceptions. In fact, when you look at the tape, Alabama really doesn't kickstart that game in their favor until Drew Pine starts throwing it to the wrong colored jersey. I'm going with LSU here at home. You're telling me I get 3 points and 2 outcomes. I know, like I said, I don't believe in Brian Kelly as a winning coach at this level in the SEC necessarily, but at home is a different beast, and this Alabama team is not the Alabama team of old.
I'm going to go the other way here. I'm going to take Alabama. You're absolutely right. They are not the Alabama team of old, and this is going to be a huge gut check game for Kalen DeBoer as well. I said gut check in the last one. Gut check for Kalen DeBoer on, can you get your guys up to play and find some semblance of the killer instinct that Nick Saban always had when he was in Tuscaloosa. I said it when this happened. I said it when this game happened. Nick Saban would have won that Tennessee game by 20 points. And the team just wasn't locked in and ready to take advantage of all the mistakes that Tennessee was giving them in that first half. But I'm picking Alabama because I think in the same way that Lane Kiffin was salivating watching, what Bama did to Georgia, I think Jalen Milroe is salivating a little bit looking at what Marcel Reed and Lenore Sellers have done to this LSU defense this year. A running QB that can hit a deep ball or two. I think that's the definition of what Jalen Milroe is. Yes, he's improved in some of the other aspects of his game. And he's looked a little uncomfortable at times trying to run a different offense. But what I know Jalen Milroe can do is run the football and hit a deep ball or two. And that seems to be this LSU defense's absolute kryptonite. And like whether SEC Shorts is joking about it or their fans are pulling their hair out watching a freshman come in at Kyle Field and just run right over them, I think that's going to be a real problem for them in this game. But none of that will matter if Alabama's defense can't get off the field. On the season, they've been pretty good. I think they're actually top 20 on the whole season in third down defense. But in their two losses, they've given up 56.25% conversions on third down. That would be good for 134th out of 134 if they were doing that every single game. So it really is just what type of focus they have and what type of intensity they have in those critical moments on defense. If they show up and play the way that they've shown against teams like Missouri and teams like Georgia in the first half, then they're going to win this game in Baton Rouge and they're going to position themselves to be in the college football playoff and knock out a rival from contention. But if they do what they did against Vanderbilt or Tennessee in the second half, when they let the offense get going, especially on third downs, they're going to walk out with a loss and they're going to be done before the middle of November.
The SEC student availability reports came out just a little bit ago. West Weeks and CJ Daniels for LSU are listed as questionable for this game. So it is worth monitoring. If you're waiting to lay a few hard-earned American shekels on this game, I would definitely check the injury report, maybe a little closer to kick. We're picking this on Wednesday night as we sit here. Trey, I want to set something up for you before we move on here. This is an elimination game for the college football playoff. There is no doubt about it. The loser of this game can pack it up. They're not going to the SEC championship game. They're certainly not going to the college football playoff. And you have two storylines that are absolutely fascinating. If LSU loses, then Brian Kelly will be eliminated from everything that LSU has worked for at home, at night, to your hated rival in Alabama. And oh, by the way, you would have had 2 losses in 3 weeks sandwiched around a bye where you blew a double-digit lead in College Station to Texas A&M. That not only has on-the-field ramifications, but recruiting ramifications as well. And I mentioned the steam around Brian Kelly not being the right fit for LSU. It seems to kick up again if they lose this game. On the other side, the natives are restless in Tuscaloosa. Kalen DeBoer has not been impressive this year, no matter how you slice it for Alabama. If they lose this game on the road in a tough spot at night in Death Valley, it feels like everything that Nick Saban built as far as the toughness, the culture, the winning ways, the finding a way to beat your rival, all of that might be out the window. And maybe that's a knee-jerk reaction. I'm just saying that's how I think it's going to be perceived. Which of these two coaches' legacies and seats warm up the most with a loss?
I think it's Brian Kelly because he's at home, and you never want to lose a rivalry game at home when you have a chance to eliminate your rival from playoff contention and really embarrass him. So if he misses this opportunity, yes, I know that he's an underdog. Yes, I know that we've seen some marked improvement, especially on the defensive side of the ball for LSU this year. And he's coming off of a year where he lost his Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. That's all true, but LSU fans are a very fickle bunch. They will turn on you extremely quickly. We all remember what happened with Coach O, where he won a national championship, and by the end of the 2020 season, they were ready to run him out of town. So it's going to be Brian Kelly. If he loses this game, one, he misses a golden opportunity to prove that LSU can just be a model of consistency in this era of college football, because it would be setting them up for 3 10-win seasons in a row, and one where they were knocking on the door of the college football playoff. They would have been able to knock out Georgia in the SEC championship game. Then they would have had a shot at the 14 playoff. And then another where they're going to go to Atlanta again 2 times in 3 years. There's not a lot of hardware there for Brian Kelly. And yes, if he wins this game, he'll have gotten to Atlanta. But if he loses this, they're 3 years in, and the LSU fans are going to start wondering when the trophies are going to be coming, because they're so used to that with all of the last, 3 or 4 coaches having won not just an SEC title, but a national title relatively quickly.
I think I agree with you. I tend to lean in favor of Brian Kelly there. On the other side, though, if Kalen DeBoer does lose this, we talk about culture in college football and how important that is, especially in a transient era now with the transfer portal. It's so difficult to build that up. You have to be able to instill those principles and get the most out of your football team in a very quick manner, right? And DeBoer is obviously filling the biggest shoes in the history of this game following Nick Saban. And yet, I wonder how bad the fallout is in Tuscaloosa if DeBoer loses this. The wins, other than the win against Georgia, have not felt overly impressive. And obviously that Georgia win almost slipped through your fingers as well. It just feels like Alabama is a step slower, a hair sloppier. The penalties have been a major issue for this Alabama team. So I do wonder how quickly smoke starts to rise out of Tuscaloosa if they lose this game. Let's go to our final game of the Big Three. We've got number 20, Colorado at Texas Tech, 3 p.m. on Fox. Deion Sanders figured out what Red Raider fans throw onto the field after kickoffs. I wasn't sure if they were tacos or fajitas, asked about the legality of the tortillas raining onto the field. I think Colorado is in for an interesting environment. It's going to be a hostile environment this Saturday afternoon when they play the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Colorado is suddenly tied for second in the Big 12, Trey, after the chaos around them has gone on. Iowa State losing, Utah, Kansas State, Oklahoma State's never even been competitive. Arizona's sunk like a stone, and Arizona State lost their quarterback and now is suddenly not as immortal as maybe they were looking like they were in the first half of the season. The Buffs, meanwhile, have kind of quietly gone about their business. And Trey, that's what we were asking them to do, was just focus on the football. They had talented guys on the roster. Now it seems like Coach Prime finally has the guys playing as a cohesive unit. The offense is explosive. The defense has actually made some nice stops on the field. We've seen some improvement in the run defense. The pass defense has taken step forwards as well. On the other side, Texas Tech, they're suddenly back into contention in the Big 12 with a win here. They beat Iowa State in a big-time win on the road last week in Ames. They don't control their destiny with 2 losses in conference right now, but the path certainly gets a little bit more friendly with the home win. Colorado is 3.5-point favorites on the road. Which side are you taking?
I'm going to take Colorado. I would love for Texas Tech to keep their Big 12 title hopes alive. I really would love to see some chaos in the Big 12 with a bunch of 2-loss teams fighting for a spot in Arlington to get a win and go to the college football playoff. But this game really does feel sometimes it's simple, right? Sometimes there's an obvious matchup that you feel like as long as the team that's in advantage in that matchup can exploit that matchup, that they should win this one rather comfortably. And that's the Colorado pass offense versus the Texas Tech pass defense for me. Sometimes it's just that simple. Last time we saw that there was a big disparity like this, I'll point you back to the UCF game for Colorado, where I think the Buffs were like 14-point dogs in that game or something ridiculous like that. And they walk out with a massive resounding victory because they were able to exploit those matchups. They won the game 48-21 as multiple touchdown underdogs because they're able to exploit a bad matchup on defense. You mentioned that the Buffs have also quietly improved their defense as well. So that's going to tip in their favor, I think, too. But the biggest thing is they just look different. You said it. They're quietly going about their business. They seem more focused and locked in, less about the flash and more about the substance at this point in the year. And I think that's doing them a lot of favors in these games. It's going to do them a lot of favors down the stretch. If they can get past this one in Lubbock, the path to Arlington is wide open for them to get into a game where they can play and try to win their way into the playoff.
It certainly looks good for Colorado if they can survive this. Texas Tech has the 133rd, it's the second worst pass defense in the country. They're one of only 2 teams giving up over 300 yards through the air on average. It's them at 307, and then Tulsa is dead last at 308. I think this is also a keep it simple, stupid special. I will certainly root for Texas Tech. I think Joey McGuire is really good in the month of November. There's no doubt about it. And he's really good at home in the month of November as well. But I think this is a classic letdown spot for Texas Tech. You're coming off the high of an improbable upset last week in Ames in the rain. You knock off an undefeated team. Now you come back home. How can the Red Raiders handle that success? I want to say that McGuire could have his guys ready to do that emotionally, but on the field, that talent disparity as far as Colorado quarterback and wide receivers versus the defensive backs room that, I mean, hasn't been able to stop the JV squad this season. So I'm going to take Colorado minus the points as well. I think you would actually put in the run sheet Joey McGuire's stats in November.
Yeah, Joey Mack is 4-0 at home in November. He's 14-4 overall in Lubbock. So if you're looking for something to be confident in, if you're a Texas Tech fan, he is really good at home, and he's really good at getting his guys up for a big game. Will he be good at getting them up back-to-back weeks? Because he got them up last week in Ames. It is a kind of a letdown spot for them, but he's really good at getting his guys ready to go for these bigger games, especially at home.
They do seem to play up and down to their competition, which is certainly something he's got to iron out right on the backside of it. That loss to Baylor, that one got away from them early. And that was really before it felt like Baylor had figured out a couple of things. That felt like it came out of nowhere.
That was Sawyer Robinson's coming out party against this pass defense.
Yeah, home revenge game. That was a homecoming game for Robertson, a Lubbock kid. So anyway, all right. Well, let us know what you think of our big three, who you've got taken on either side of those. Again, at 3TechPods, where you can find us on social media and YouTube as well if you're listening on the podcast. Trey, let's roll into our Saturday storylines, and these are presented by Baller Pickleball. 3TechPod gets you 10% off your entire order with them. And we'll start in the SEC. I've got Florida and Texas on our run sheet here to start. Texas 21.5-point favorites at home, hosting the Florida Gators. We didn't know how healthy Florida would be, if Billy Napier would be the coach still when the Gators rolled into Austin. And improbably, Napier is still at the helm, but the Gators have lost their top 2 quarterback options. Graham Mertz has been hurt for weeks with the torn ACL, and DJ Lagway suffered a grade 2 sprain of his hamstring last week in the loss to Georgia. It's worth noting that Napier said that they hadn't ruled Lagway out. But at this point, with a grade 2 hamstring, if you're an NFL fan, I think that's the severity that Dak Prescott just suffered in the Atlanta Falcons game, and he's going to be out for 3 to 4 weeks. So for Lagway, his future's all ahead of him. There is no reason for him to play in this game. I would imagine it's going to be the Yale transfer that suits up at quarterback for the Gators as well. If that's the case, Trey, I don't imagine that the Gators muster much of a defense against this Texas offense. I don't imagine that they score many points on the road in Austin. Maybe I'm wrong, and if you disagree, definitely tell me. But I think my question for you is, what do you need to see from Texas this week to make you feel confident in not only where they are ranked in the college football playoff, but as they prepare to go to College Station with, all the implications on the line, maybe a trip to Atlanta on the line? What does Texas need to do to be prepared for that game?
Well, I'm sure their fans would just really love to see a convincing win over a competent team. So a team that does one thing well, at least, right? Because people are really waking up to the fact to realize that they have a quality win problem. Their best win is against Vanderbilt. They eked it out on the road and really looked sloppy at times in Nashville. And their biggest test of the year so far, they got a flat F at home against Georgia. So they have a quality win problem. They're resting on the laurels of a preseason ranking at this point. But the problem, Mitch, you said, what do I need to see before they go to College Station? I don't think they're going to have an opportunity to prove that they have that ability to win convincingly against a competent team until they go to College Station. If it's the Aiden Warner show this weekend, which it's looking like it's going to be, that's not really going to move the needle at home. They play at Arkansas. They have Kentucky at home, but neither one of those teams are really going to inspire a lot of confidence. Even if you beat them like you should, it's not going to inspire a lot of confidence because they still wouldn't have done it against a team that looks like they're competent at more than just maybe one thing.
I think if Arkansas hadn't gotten the doors blown off them at home this previous week, I mean, there was a lot of chatter that Arkansas was licking their chops about the Longhorns coming to town. They upset
and
Tennessee.
They still will. They will be ready for that game.
Yep.
They hate Texas in Fayetteville, Arkansas.
Yeah, no doubt about it. That will still be a fun game, no matter the result. I know Razorback fans are hopeful that Taylon Green is finally healthy by that game. I think for Texas, I agree. I think they need to take care of business. I think Quinn Ewers needs to get started early, and he needs to take care of the football. I know the Twitter community for the Longhorns wants to see them bomb the ball down the field, and maybe you get to see some of that. I think you need to see them establish a ground game and dominate Florida on the ground. The Gators only have the 88th rushing defense. I think in order to set Quinn up for success, you have to be able to run the football. And so if Texas can't do that for whatever reason against the Gators, I think maybe that's a little bit of cause for pause for the Longhorns. But we'll see if they can cover that spread in Austin. The other game in the Southeastern Conference that we've got our eyes on, and you specifically have singled out here, South Carolina, 3-point favorites on the road at Vanderbilt. I've named this my portfolio game of the week in Nashville. I want to see whose stock is rising faster. Vanderbilt has exploded onto the scene this year. It feels like South Carolina, after a very slow start, maybe starting to take care of some of the little things. They bullied Texas A&M at home this past weekend. Which side of this fence do you find yourself on?
I don't have a pick for this game. I'm going to chicken out and not give you a pick. Maybe I'll do it in a second. But you said it's the portfolio game. This is the game of the week, Mitch. It's not in the big three, and that's a travesty. It's appointment viewing because the Vandy pimp is going to be on the sideline from SEC Shorts. Like, I'm so excited for that. But in all seriousness, I am really excited for Diego Pavia, Lenore Sellers. We saw a lot from Sellers last week. Obviously, that offense looked like it found something against the Texas A&M defense. Maybe if Vanderbilt can tackle, then it's not going to be as successful for South Carolina. But I am really excited to see this game. I think it's going to be a fun back and forth track meet. Both of these teams want to run the ball a lot. And we'll see if Pavia can have a little bit more magic. He's already won, 4 games as an outright dog this year. So what's a fifth?
I think I lean South Carolina simply because the magic of Vanderbilt's offense, I think, is neutralized by the speed and the physicality of South Carolina's front.
The Dragons will get them too.
Boy, if Vandy's losing to a Texas high school, then throw everything out.
A couple of years ago, they might have. A couple of years when Quinn was at South Lake Carroll, that might have been an interesting spread. But.
No doubt. Mike Elko in his press conference this week, when they asked him what the key was in that loss at South Carolina, he said that the pass rush was just tackling wrong. He's like, Lenore Sellers is Nick Scorton back there. Like, we're trying to tackle Trey Watson, the tight end, and we're trying to tackle him like a quarterback. And a lot of those A&M defenders went high instead of going around the waist, around the legs, trying to take him down. And Sellers was just able to fight that off. If Vandy can get to the quarterback, I think that's the major key for their defense, because we've seen earlier in this season, when you get to Lenore Sellers and you don't give him time to create magic and get outside the pocket, and suddenly the run game isn't nearly as efficient, their offense doesn't do anything. Ole Miss did that to them in spades earlier this season. But if Sellers has time to create, I think I like South Carolina, even though they're on the road in this one. Should be a fun one in Nashville, though. Do
you have any OU Mizzou thoughts? That's the other kind of interesting one in the SEC. It looks like Brady Cook, questionable.
Yeah.
Nate Noel, questionable. We'll see if they actually play.
I think if you didn't have to give a pick in the last game, I'm not going to give a pick in this one. I truly don't have a cognitive thought on this game. I think both teams are woefully unimpressive. I think if there's one one unit I trust on the field, and we talk about that a lot, it's probably Oklahoma's defense. I just don't know if Missouri's going to be able to move the football. And so Oklahoma's at home, right? They're 2.5-point favorites.
No,
is
it's
that
in
right?
Como. It
is in Como.
Yeah.
Okay. If it was in Norman, I think I'd say Oklahoma. Yeah, that'll be a game to watch just for the fallout. I think that turns into the message board special to the Cliffs if the Sooners especially lose. I wonder if you would start to fire even more personnel if Venables finds a way to lose that game.
If they do find a way to lose this one, and it's really on the table, especially if Brady Cook plays. If Brady Cook plays, I'm picking Mizzou. But if we get the Drew Pine experience, I'm not going to back him with any sort of dream of a financial investment. If they can't beat Mizzou, they're not going to a bowl game. I feel pretty comfortable saying that because they close with Alabama and LSU.
I mean, yeah, it's a brutal schedule for Oklahoma. I'm sure Sooner fans are tired of that reminder each and every week, but it is what it is. All right, let's go over to the Big 12 where, I mean, it's just chaos. We're trying to find a clear path. I think BYU obviously is undefeated. They've got the clearest path. Other than that, you can certainly make a case for Colorado. You can make a case for Iowa State. Teams like Texas Tech and Kansas State, or not Kansas State, Cincinnati, Arizona State, they need things to break their way, right? West Virginia is technically even still in it. But Iowa State takes on Kansas this week. The Clones are 3-point favorites on the road against the Jayhawks. They've got to win out to even have a chance to make it to Arlington. And I feel like maybe the overreaction is to say that Iowa State isn't a good football team. I know that they haven't defended the run all that well this season. That's been uncharacteristic from Matt Campbell's group. But the offense has really picked it up. The offense last week, Trey, was neutralized by that rainstorm that rolled through Ames. I mean, just nobody was able to reliably throw the football. I feel like the Clones get back on track this week.
I'm with you too, but a team, if you struggle against the run, Kansas is not a fun team to play with the type of offense that they're going to run. Kansas started out awful, but they've started to turn things around. They played Kansas State close. Maybe that was like a last stand situation, right? They've got their rival at home, or they're in Manhattan, but they have the rivalry game. They can spoil their rival season. Maybe that was a last stand situation, but I think there's still a little bit of juice left in Kansas. And if Iowa State can't stop the run, they're going to be in trouble. It's going to be a close one late. I mean, I want to give them a pass for Tech, and I want to give them a pass. I certainly give the offense a pass for not getting a spark with the monsoon that they were playing in. But the week before that, or right before the bye, it was the UCF debacle where they had to have a miracle comeback late. So I got to see a little bit more from the Cyclones defense, and going and stopping Kansas would prove a lot to me, but got to see a little bit more from the Cyclones defense before I'm ready to buy back in.
I feel like Iowa State's performance and their tightrope that they've walked this season, I feel like those experiences are holding BYU back in the playoff committee's eyes, right? Like if the Big 12 is this, like we keep saying, it's a wide conference, it's not a deep conference, then suddenly the winner of that conference, it just doesn't, you don't feel the same that you do about the SEC champ or the Big Ten champ, or heck, I mean, even the ACC champ. If it's Miami or SMU, you're going to feel like that's a really solid football team playing, with some momentum behind them.
Well, but if SMU wins the ACC and BYU's undefeated, then you should go with the head-to-head, right? And that should kind of put that thought to bed.
That is certainly true. I forget, man, that feels like forever that we were there.
It really does. It feels like last season that BYU went into Dallas, and we thought that was going to end SMU season, man. Like the
national narrative was bail out. SMU's not ready.
Bail out on SMU. They might not even make a bowl game if they can't beat one of the worst Power 5 teams at home.
Yep.
Certainly didn't age well. Those takes have not aged well.
My, how the turntables. Yeah, we'll keep watching that. Conference elimination game in West Virginia at Cincinnati. The Bearcats 5-point favorites. Winner of this game still needs help to get to Arlington, but they still have a path. The loser is completely done. West Virginia played a lot better on the road than they did at home. Neil Brown infamously said he was kind of ready for a break from the friendly confines there, and the Mountaineer faithful. I think I'm going to roll with Cincinnati, though. I trust their offense just a little bit more than the Nears.
Yeah, I'm going with Cincinnati in this one, too. I think Arizona, they looked really good because they were playing Arizona last week. And I've talked a lot about how much of a debacle they are. So I'm going to go with Cincinnati at home.
Last game in the Big 12, we've got the aforementioned BYU Cougars, ranked number 9. They are 4-point favorites on the road at Utah under the lights. This is the Holy War. Now, we've seen playoff hopefuls slip in these tough road games in November. Utah has won 9 of the last 11 games in this series, but BYU did win the last time that they matched up in 2021. Does history play any sort of a factor in the game on Saturday night to you, with Utah being kind of what they are this season, just a woeful disappointment?
I mean, I want the chaos of Utah derailing their rival season. That's what makes college football great, getting these shots and taking advantage of them and just really rubbing it in your rival's face. Like, I would love that just from a neutral perspective. But I just don't think Utah's done anything to give me confidence that they can even keep this one relatively close right now. 4 straight losses where they've put up 10, 19, 7, and 14 points offensively. Maybe their defense can shut down BYU, but it looks like you only need about 14 to feel comfortable to beat Utah right now. So even if the defense completely shuts them down, I still feel like BYU can get that done.
I think so as well. There's way too much going in favor of BYU. And listen, they've not been the most efficient offense this season. They haven't put up the biggest numbers. They've relied on a tough defense and some timely turnovers to really flip the script. They can do that against Utah on the road. Defense travels, and I do trust BYU's offense more than whatever Utah's been running out there these last couple of weeks since Cam Rising's been hurt. So I'll go with the Cougs. It's a small number on the road. We expect it to be close. It's a rivalry game, a hated rivalry, but I'll go with BYU to get it done. The Big Ten, let's start off with Michigan at number 8, Indiana. Trey, the Hoosiers, as of time of recording, favored by 14. This is the first game that Indiana has been favored in against Michigan since 1968, and it's a big number.
That's crazy. And the fact that it's a 14-point spread was really surprising. But, I mean, we've said it time and time again this year, Mitch. We've said it almost every week. It's not just that Indiana is beating teams because their schedule's not impressive. We know that. It's that they're destroying the hopes and dreams of everybody that they step on the field against, both offensively and defensively. I really haven't seen anything like it. They haven't taken a week off from just destroying teams. So I'm rolling with it until proven otherwise. They're at home. It's a big number, but Michigan offensively, I just don't think can keep up. And if you give Indiana an inch, they've proven that they'll take a mile this year.
I'm right there with you. This line started at 10.5. It's been bet all the way up to 14
That's
here
crazy.
the first part of this week. That really is truly crazy. I do wonder what happens if Michigan is able to stop the run for Indiana, right? The Hoosiers have put up some big numbers through the air. Curtis Rourke will be back for this game. But first and foremost, they've really done a lot of their road grading on the ground with 2 talented running backs. If Michigan takes that away and makes Indiana somewhat one-dimensional, how do they handle that? That's what I'm going to be watching for in this game. Michigan secondary, we came into the season saying they're one of the best in the country. They've not been able to hold up against the speedy wide receivers. Those deep routes down the field, they've looked slow. Oregon made them look lethargic last week, like they were stuck in quicksand. And guess what? At Indiana, if you haven't watched their football this year, Indiana has some guys like Elijah Surratt that can do just the same. So I'm going to take Indiana. I will take the points. It's at home. To me, they've shown, like when they beat Nebraska, when they beat Washington at home, I think they're ready to play solid football. It is an uptick in competition, but I think they're ready. I'm going to trust Kurt Cignetti here and go with the Hoosiers.
Is it an uptick in competition? In brand, it certainly is. And
I think
talent level, but whatever, Michigan, that they just have not been the sum of their parts this year. And you mentioned the run game. I mean, Michigan gave up like 180 on the ground last week to Oregon. They gave up 170 to Illinois. They've been able to get got on the ground this year by not super elite rushing offenses even.
And it's interesting because now we're, I guess, towards the midway point in the NFL season, and you're hearing, scouts talk about turning on the tape for the next the next draft prep. There's a lot of distrust on this Michigan defensive line. Mason Graham is a generational prospect, I think, but there is something to these Michigan defensive linemen performing really well in college and then just like flatlining in the NFL. They lost their guru to the Chargers this year. And they have suffered a little bit in the performance. So yeah, certainly something to watch. Last note, Hoosiers won in 2020 against Michigan, but before that they hadn't won since 1987. So a non-COVID year. It's been quite some time since the Hoosiers have won under normal circumstances. Other two games in the conference that really, I think, stood out. Maryland at number 1, Oregon. Oregon's a 25-point favorite. And then Washington on the road at number 6, Penn State. The Nittany Lions are 13-point favorites. Washington put together a complete game, and they took down, a struggling USC team at home last week, but they were dogs. They were home dogs last week in that one. They found a way to beat Lincoln Riley's bunch. Penn State looked woeful on offense. For me, I think Penn State can win this game, but for me to feel really confident, or confident at all, I should say, I'm not going to feel really confident in Penn State in a big game again until they start winning them. But for me to feel any hope and any spark towards this team doing anything in the playoffs, I need to see them kind of blow out Washington. I need to see them put a beat down on a team that has not been very good defensively, and the offense has really relied on some broken tackles and some big plays to put points on the board.
Yeah. Is this the whiteout game? Did I hear that right last week? I know it's a night game.
I believe it might be.
Well, if they find a way to lose to Washington, I don't want to ever hear about the whiteout ever again. Because that would just be ridiculous. It's a letdown spot for both teams, obviously, coming off of the Ohio State game and the USC game, like you mentioned, for Washington. Washington has proven that they can move the ball and they can cause teams trouble even when they have a talent disadvantage with the opposing defense. But yeah, Penn State at home, they really shouldn't have trouble with this one. If they do, like I said, I don't want to hear about the whiteout ever again.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. You need to see a statement here from Penn State this weekend. ACC is where we'll wrap up the Power Four. You've got number 4, Miami, only 11-point favorites on the road at Georgia Tech. I think they might, they being the Yellow Jackets, might get Haynes King back from his injury. They're fresh off a bye week. For me, Trey, I'm just wondering, can the Canes put together a complete defensive performance? They've allowed at least 31 points in 4 of their last 5 games. And while they've won every game on their schedule this season, there have been some really tight moments. I mean, yes, they ended up looking like they blew out Duke. They were losing by double digits at one point to the Blue Devils.
Yeah, I was trying to pull up the over-unders and see like what their record is in the over this year, but it seems like it's been a safe bet to take the over every single game this year for Miami. But I feel like their MO has kind of been playing close and then pulling away late. I see that kind of happening again against Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech's going to put up some points in the first half, especially if Haynes King plays. But I think their talent is just going to be a little too much. And Cam Ward's proven to me at this point that when it's go time, he's going to lock in and he's going to find Xavier Restrepo and just cause a lot of problems for opposing defenses.
Yeah, I think the Canes are going to push the Jackets around on offense, certainly. It is happening, by the way, as we go up to Chestnut Hill. We talked about this in the preseason. We teased this. We prayed for it. We hoped for it. Syracuse on the road at Boston College. Nobody's going to care about this game other than the fact that it is on the CW network. We have Tom Brenneman on the call, and a man named Castellanos will be on the field.
Oh my goodness. We need a deep throw by Castellanos on the first play. Like, please, Bill O'Brien has to know about this. He can't be living that far under a rock about his own program. So I need him to dial that up first play and just Tom to completely lean into it.
Are you surprised that Syracuse is a road dog here?
A little bit, but remember we highlighted this one preseason and Boston College fans that were upset at us saying that they were going to win as an underdog, but I guess they're right. Shout out to the Boston College fans. You were favored in this game, kind of against all odds. I am kind of surprised, but a lot of the metrics like Boston College as well. A lot of those analytics like Boston College in this one.
Yeah, for all of the flack that I took I'm not sure how I was supposed to project 4-4 Boston College being a favorite at home against Syracuse, a Syracuse team that had looked decent until their debacle of the last, they did end up beating Virginia Tech, but against Pitt, this is a 6-2 Syracuse team. I mean, I feel like my preseason projections still hold. I did have Boston College winning this game in the preseason though, so sure, we'll roll with the Eagles at home.
Cal McCord is Carson Beck North, I will say, and that can be a lot of problems, and that's kind of been where Boston College made their hay this year. But Boston College also really needs this one if they want to make a bowl game. They've got a tough close with at SMU, North Carolina at home that seems like they've figured something out, and then hosting Pitt to end the year. So must win, and then you got to knock off one that you're definitely not going to be favored in.
Sure. Last game in the ACC, and I read, I've forgotten who wrote from The Athletic. It might have been Stu Mandel on Florida State at Notre Dame. Notre Dame is 26-point favorites as of recording this. Remember when we were talking about this as a playoff elimination game in the preseason?
Mitch, do you remember when I went even further and said that Florida State might be like resting their starters at this point? And what do we do if Florida State's undefeated and they just say, nope, we're not going to play against Notre Dame or Charleston Southern or Florida. We're just going to go to the ACC championship and take our top 4 seed.
I do, because that was part 2, I want to say, of
you weren't on that show. I just
part of a preseason. I was on my honeymoon in Florida. I was working out when I heard you say that, and I basically had to stop the treadmill and just be like, I just had to have a moment to kind of ponder that statement. Now, Florida State may still be resting starters in this game. It just may be for a wholly different reason than what we.
I think I was right. DJU is not playing in this game, correct? I think I can take that as a win.
Sure. Yeah. Claim that as a success, if you will. Yeah, it's just sad what Florida State, they're 1-8. Is that right?
Yep.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
We have to do, I'm sure someone's researched this, but when is the last time Florida State, that program is 1-8 and has 1 win going into November? And they were lucky to get that 1 win. The Cal just kept tripping over their own feet in that game over and over again.
Yeah. Well, that's the ACC. That's the Power 4. Is there anything that kind of stands out to you in the Group of 5 slate? I think when I look down the run sheet, certainly the game that stands out to me, and I might be in attendance for this, we'll see. Number 25, Army, the disrespected troops on the road at Dactu Stadium here in North Texas. They'll play the Mean Green. Army favored by 5.5. The over-under is 63.5. They are not expecting North Texas to get like a single stop in this game.
Do we know if Bryson Daly is back? I know he had the illness last week.
I don't know if he's back, but I have to imagine that he's not going to be knocked out multiple weeks due to an illness, right?
If it was just an illness, you'd think that he would be back. But, man, I'm actually going to be in the Metroplex this weekend for other things. I might have to head up I-35 and join you up there in Denton if you decide to go to this game. It works with my schedule. But, yeah, that's certainly the most interesting game. A lot of chalk everywhere else. Memphis is out of the playoff picture at this point, but they got a plucky Rice team at home that knocked off Navy last week. Looking at the Sun Belt, we've got App State Coastal was a Thursday night game I had circled earlier this year, and I know it's a little sad. Texas State ULM is interesting. ULM's kind of fallen off, and Louisiana is going to try to keep their chokehold on this conference by hosting Arkansas State this week. I think that's 1-2.
It is
in the Sun Belt West, so that should be interesting.
Yeah, that was the other game that I was going to mention is the Cajuns and the Red Wolves. Very, very close numbers in conference. Neither offense is overly explosive. 114 points for the Cajuns in conference, 105 for the Red Wolves. But the Raging Cajun defense, certainly the much better unit. They've given up just 78 points in conference so far, and they're 7-1 to prove it. They've actually given up almost 80 fewer points on the season than the Arkansas State Red Wolves have. So I think I'll ride with the Cajuns here. It is November though, so chaos lurks around every single corner and under every single rock.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of that, out west, Boise and UNLV have a couple games they should win, but Nevada, we've seen them be plucky a lot this year. They've given some teams some scares. They've fallen off a little bit, but they've given some teams that are much better than them some scares this year. They are at home. Boise getting the 7 p.m. Fox primetime treatment this week. How about that?
Love that.
Against Nevada. UNLV has to go out to the islands, and they're 13.5-point favorites, but Hawaii, a plucky bunch out there. So it could be very interesting. Not a lot elsewhere. CUSA is a lot of top of the conference versus the bottom of the conference this week. Mountain West is kind of that way as well. But San Jose, Oregon State could be something if you need a fourth quad box game on the CW. Or if you were looking for Tom Brenneman's call on Castellanos and you forget to change the channel, I don't think you'll be crazy disappointed with that one. But a little light on the G5 slate this week, especially as the contenders are kind of thinning themselves out. It does seem like it's a 3-team race at this point with Army, Boise State, and UNLV. And Tulane's kind of alive too. Tulane's kind of clinging to life. As long as they can go undefeated, they might have a shot, but they need a lot of help.
Yeah, we did get Maction that returned this week. Bowling Green knocked off Central Michigan. Miami of Ohio in a close one over Ball State. It was pouring rain in Muncie, and the Red Hawks found a way to get that done tonight. Ohio and Kent State are playing as we record this. Northern Illinois and Western Michigan are playing as well. I think that'll do it for our Week 11 preview. We appreciate y'all hanging out. If you are new to the podcast, which a lot of you are, we really appreciate you giving us a look. We hope you subscribe. Join the Jimmies and the Joes on our social platforms as well at 3Tech Pod. You can find us on YouTube if you would like the video recording, the social media clips. We'll be rolling out a bunch of the takes, the breakdowns from this episode as well. And we'd love to talk ball with you on Saturday night for our live show as well. For Trey Reeves, I'm Mitch Mason. Thanks so much for hanging out with us until that live show on Saturday night. So long, everybody.
Gracious him. How about